the first thing I thought about was, do I have to be ready? And what does ready mean? Because a lot of people wait for different sorts of credentials in their life before they take action on whatever it is they're looking to get involved in.
Once you understand what your true value is, then your job in life is to find a place where to put it so that it makes a difference in the world and makes you happy. So I'm standing there, I'm at the peak of my existence in the tennis world. I'm respected and loved and I'm in great shape and I'm unhappy. He said, "Can I read your resume first?" I said, "Well, I didn't bring a resume. I don't have a resume." "Obviously, talk me through your business background." And I said, "Well, I don't have a business background." I read your 11 pages, Dwayne. And by the time I got to the end of the 11th page, I knew that I had a blueprint for the rest of my life. There were no small moments. Life leaves clues. You just need to reach a point of dissatisfaction where you say, I got to, I have no alternative.
Today I'm joined by Coach Jay Sargeant, author of Shift, The Gift of Reinvention, and the creator of the Shift Project. At 78, after 7 careers, Jay has learned that reinvention isn't about waiting to feel ready. It's about recognizing the moments, risks, and choices that move you toward who you're becoming. I want to get into the conversation that I feel is really important to have. And when you signed the form for the show, and I was able to really look at the things that you do, I said, what Coach Jay is doing is the type of thing that people are thinking about all the time and in different areas in their life. For me, the first thing I thought about was, do I have to be ready? And what does ready mean when I'm about to venture into something new, when I'm about to aspire towards a goal or to achieve something? Do I have to be ready, and what does ready look like? Because one of the statements that you said was credentials are overrated. And I think a lot of people wait for different sorts of credentials in their life before they take action on whatever it is they're looking to get involved in. What do you mean by that when you talk about credentials are overrated? Elaborate on that.
Well, first let me make an important distinction, because I don't want to look like a goofball, Dwayne. If I'm about to have brain surgery tomorrow morning at Cedars-Sinai Hospital, I am hoping that the neurosurgeon is very credentialed. He had to go to medical, or she had to go to medical school. They had to be an intern, then a resident. And then, so I want to make this distinction. For the audience that I address, my peeps, my tribe, are entrepreneurs, people who have a hunger to have a level of control, who don't want a boss. Now, they may need a boss for a while. They may need a structured environment, but in their heart, they want to create something that's their own, something where there are no limits, and something where nobody's pushing them around. I've never had a job, not because I'm a big seeker. I don't need more money. Money has never been motivating. I do what I do so that I can have personal freedom and autonomy, so that I can wake up and decide exactly the agenda I want for the day. And if you're that audience, boy, is my message for you. So what I mean by that, really clearly, is once you understand what your true value is, then your job in life is to find a place where to put it so that it makes a difference in the world and makes you happy. And I'll give you a quick example. Very important example. I became a tennis professional before I ever owned a tennis racket. That's a long story, delightful. People should read the book, listen to the audio tape. But I basically, from a basketball player, I became a tennis professional, and I ended up having an academy and a summer camp and getting kids on the national tour and getting them into the bigs. At some moment in time, when I had an academy, a summer camp, 30 pros working for us, stringing money, pro shop, more students than we could handle, I walked away from that gig. And I want everyone to understand that, because I was on court 8, the instructional court, beating balls over and over and over again. And I said to myself, God didn't put you on the planet to be a glorified construction worker. And I have mad respect for construction work. But I realized, I said to myself, do you want to be doing, you're almost 30 now. Is this what you want to be doing for the next 20 years? Standing here and hitting tennis balls? And I said, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to do something in long pants. I want to do something more cerebral. I'm doing as much as I can in this environment. I'm creating positive impact. I'm teaching the whole individual. My children meditated and did weight training and yoga, and we ate organically. I mean, we were treating the whole person, but it still wasn't good enough. So what I did, Dwayne, is I went to the 5 most powerful, wealthy people who I taught. And because tennis instruction was expensive at the time, I know that you're into the fitness. I mean, we were charging major bucks. Our summer camp was a big investment. My crowd was a wealthy crowd. I eventually ended up, and you'll get a kick out of this. So this is people going to say, oh, he's a name dropper. But I taught the Kraft family before he owned the Patriots. So Robert and his wife, Myra, were students of mine. But more importantly, the children. Jonathan, who's the president of the Patriots, he was in my Tiny Tots program, the 4 to 6-year-old program with John Havlicek's child, just so you know. So I'm standing there. I'm at the peak of my existence in the tennis world, and I'm unhappy. And I'm going to say this very clearly so that I touch somebody's heart out there. I was making more money than any 30-year-old should be making. I'm wearing these glorious Fila outfits, and I'm respected and loved, and I'm in great shape, and I'm unhappy. And I have no tolerance for emotional pain. I can take a punch. I was a basketball player. I loved rebounding. I'd knock my mother's front teeth out to get an offensive rebound, not a defensive rebound. I wanted to score. So offensive rebounds, I wanted to put those little chippies in there. I wanted bunnies to add to my statistics. But in any case, at the end of the day, I went to the wealthiest people in New England because I was back in Boston. And I said, who am I? What do I do next? You've watched me for 7 years. I've been teaching your family, your children. You've watched me in this environment. What do I do next? Who am I? And every one of them, Dwayne, said, oh my God, you should sell something. You're a salesman. But Jay, with your ego, you can't sell pencils. You need to sell grand things with big commissions, big outcomes. So I said, okay, thank you. How do I do that? And they said, we're going to set you up with some meetings. And I took a meeting with a guy named George Nadav. And George Nadav was the most important franchise developer of this period of time. Many, many franchises. I'm not going to go into his background, but he was an amazing character. His name is George Nadav. And I got a meeting with him. Now, I did a few things that I've got to share with everyone. Number one, I had the good intelligence. Even then, I was a kid. I went and bought my first blue suit. I went to Simon & Sons in Copley Square, and I bought a blue suit. I went to Filey's basement, and I bought a Mark Cross briefcase because I knew I was completely not qualified, but at least I wanted visually to walk into that meeting with George Nadav looking like he could put me on the team. His franchise development model was putting men and women in very expensive hotels supported by Wall Street Journal campaigns, putting wealthy people in a room to buy $250,000 franchises. And the modus operandi was 45 to 60 minutes of public speaking. Okay, that's the setup. I walk in and I look at George, and it was scary. I'm just going to tell everyone right now, he looked like a warlord. He looked like Pope Leo. I mean, the office was so big that just walking through the door, I could barely see him at the end. And he had an obscenely large desk. So as I'm walking there, I'm thinking, man, if this guy's got this as an office, he's going to want someone with courage. So I'm going to step up. So I sit in front of him, and he says, your friend, Mark Roberts tells me you're an incredible talent. I've been looking forward to this meeting for days. He says to me, I said, oh, me too. He said, can I read your resume first? I said, well, I didn't bring a resume. I don't have a resume. He goes, oh, you showed up without a resume. Well, obviously, talk me through your business background. And I said, well, I don't have a business background. In fact, I don't like business. In fact, if I'm in an airport and I'm about to get on an airplane, the last thing in the world I'd ever be doing at the store is buying fortune, entrepreneur, or success. I'm not interested in those things. Those are not my topics. My topics are Sports Illustrated, Tennis Magazine, Sports Magazine. That's not anything in my past. And now he's perplexed. And he says to me, well, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'll tell you what I'm doing here. Mark Roberts, who set this meeting up, says that you sell big franchises, quality franchises in hotel rooms by putting someone out in the world speaking for 45 to 60 minutes. Is that your modus operandi? He said, well, that's how we do it. I said, then put me on the team. He said, what do you mean? I said, I'm the best stand-up guy you'll ever meet. If I'm in front of any audience and you tell me this is what you want them to do, I'll get them to do that thing. I know this about me, but don't take my word for it. Is that your brochure? And I pointed to a little trifold brochure, Dwayne, back in the old days, a cheap little brochure. And I said, does that describe your business opportunities? He says, yes. I said, well, I'm going to take that brochure and I'm going to go out into the lobby and give me 15 minutes. I'm going to read that brochure. Then I'm going to come back into this massive office of yours and I'm going to give you a presentation. And if it knocks you out and blows you away, put me on the team. And if it doesn't, I'm out the door. But here's what I want you to do. Put your Goombas, put your killer salespeople in this room. Put your owners and your executives in this room. It was a very large room. I said, put them in here. I want an audience. He says, okay, kid, go do it. Now, obviously, I'm not telling anyone this story because I come back in and I, I spit on my shoes. I come back in and I give a 10-minute presentation. And I'm not going to get into spatial anchoring, but what I do is both learned and intuitive as a public speaker. So I'm giving this great presentation. When it's done, and by the way, I want somebody to get, who's listening to this, another important point. I notice as I walk in the room that I am hated, that people want to basically shoot me. These are my competitors, right? So I delete them. As a public speaker, I'm only looking at who gives me energy. I got a sample size and an audience of one. George Nadab. They are deleted, okay? I'm doing my thing. When it's over, he throws everybody out of the room. He says, get out. I want to be with the kid. Sits me in front of him and he says, you didn't say one thing that was accurate. There wasn't one detail that you nailed. This made no sense whatsoever, but it was the best speech I've ever heard in my entire life. We can smooth out the details. You can learn the content, but I want to put you with your 41-inch long new blue suit out on the road. You're on the team. In my opinion, I've done this again and again. It's who I am. Credentials are overrated. I know that you're into sports fitness. You know that I'm currently at age 78, 1 month away from 79. I am teaching pickleball, Dwayne. And I'm not just teaching old geezers pickleball like me. I'm teaching champions. I got 2 kids that are 14 years old that are in the top 5 in the country. They've both signed major deals on TV all the time. And I'm still teaching. But I didn't go get a credential to teach pickleball. They have these $500 to $1,000. Everybody's now a pickleball coach because you go to a one-day program for $500. And I'm a pickleball coach because I create value. My students succeed. When they walk on the court after a lesson, someone comes up and says, what in God's name have you done to your game? Your forehand is amazing now. Who taught you that? And they go, well, that old guy, Mr. Miyagi. I got this old geezer pickleball coach. He could hardly tie his shoes in the morning, but His techniques are terrific. So I think people get stuck because they're waiting for permission. They get stuck because they don't know their true value and where to aim it. That's what I mean by credentials are overrated.
You know what's fascinating about your story is that your own internal credibility that you discovered was through the questions that you asked your closest friends and family members, and they all came back to you and said you're a great salesperson. Is that one way for a person to unstick themselves?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I don't know if if I'm going to look to the etiology of where this mindset is created, I'm going to have to give a big shout out long before that moment. I was created by Bernie and Gladys Sargeant. Those are my parents in heaven. And my mom and dad got married so early that we lived in my maternal grandparents' apartment house. Nobody owned property in my background. So we had one little room in their apartment in Brighton, Massachusetts. And my folks were only 17 and 18, so they got on a streetcar, went downtown to go do work, conventional work in department stores. But my mom and dad, and I'm lending my mom and dad to everybody who's listening to this. In my body of work, neurolinguistic programming, we say, if you don't have a good model, borrow a model. Find a model. I've listened to some of your guests, people talking about how Michael Jordan was their model, and on and on and on. But at the end of the day, what you need to know is the following. My folks were dreamers. I learned entrepreneurship early on. So borrow this experience. I'll never forget. I went to Boston College, and it was a bracing experience because everyone around me had more money than I had. So the very first Christmas in my freshman year, I went to Long Island to the Belford Christmas dinner. And the Belfords were phenomenally wealthy. And the dinner was dissonant to me because we were in little spaces and eating gefilte fish and everybody screaming and yelling and joyous and loud. And now I go to the Belford Christmas dinner. Quiet, genteel, everything set up beautifully. And the conversation was about stock equity, about financial strategies. And I'm there, I'll never forget. This was like 70 years ago, I'm talking about, not 70, but 60 years ago. I'm sitting at the Belford table for that Christmas and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm screwed. My parents have never owned one stock. My parents have no long-term portfolio strategy. They don't know the difference between a paycheck and equity. What am I going to do in this lifetime? But I was so wrong, Dwayne. I was so wrong because my folks gave me a gift bigger than financial strategies. My mom and dad were dreamers. They wanted to be successful. To them, because it's a long time ago, it wasn't profound like your guests or how I would define it. They just wanted a little bit more money. They wanted to take a vacation they couldn't afford. They wanted to someday send my brother and I to a college that they couldn't imagine they'd ever be able to afford. So what they did is they hustled. My folks were hustlers. My mom taught Chinese cooking classes as a Jewish lady in our little dinky kitchen. My mom and dad taught mambo and cha-cha lessons in the little dinky living room that we had. My mom sold shoes in the living room. She would get black pumps, design them with rhinestones, and I was on Tuesdays and Thursday nights the shoe boy who would run from the bedroom where the boxes were, and we would have ladies try on shoes. My mom and dad, when my father was only making $7,000 a year with 2 full-time jobs, delivering newspapers for the Boston Globe at night, throwing them in front of drugstores off the back of a truck, and working for Boston Redevelopment in the daytime. $7,000 for 2 full-time jobs, but always doing something extra. My dad sold felt hats to mafia mobsters in the North End of the Boston area. And so at some moment in time, they got this idea. I just love telling this story. Remember, they don't have a pot to pee in. I mean, that's just the bottom line. They found these pictures that they fell in love with. The classic comedy and drama picture, but in the form of clowns. So they reproduced tragedy and comedy in these clowns. They spent more money on creating those posters than they had. And then they made a move that I still have mad respect for. God bless your mom and dad. They spent $500 on a New Yorker magazine classified ad to sell those clowns. We ran home when the magazine came out. Me from school, my brother from school, my folks from the jobs that they had. We thought when we looked at the mail slot, we would need buckets for the envelopes buying those clowns. 3! That was our best day. 3 sales. $500 ad investment, which was all the money they had. By the time we reached the next week, it became really clear that that wasn't going to work. My folks were undaunted, Dwayne. The dream never got destroyed. They ultimately, and I'm going to give them credit because I don't want everyone to think, well, I learned being an entrepreneur by watching my folks lose. My mother, and this is a clue, we're going to get into this today, but this is a clue. My mother walked into a store on Cape Cod, saw this art glass that she adored, went to the owner eventually after creating rapport and said, if you can sign me this glass, my husband and I will put it in our car. You're on the Cape. We'll sell it for you in Boston. So that's the seeds of an entrepreneurial move. No small moments. Who knows where it begins? It begins with something you care about. It can seem obscure and little and ridiculous, but that glass business put my brother through 4 years of Harvard University, paid for Harvard completely. The glass business. So it wasn't as if they were serial losers. They found things that worked. My dad, God rest his soul, had such a joyful personality and always dressed up. He was, remember Leave It to Beaver when the dad would come down in the morning with a suit on? That was my dad. My dad, whatever he was doing, he had a suit and a tie on. He loved ties. He found cheap ties in New York City, went to the manufacturer, bought them using his sartorial, mindset, and he would bring them back to Boston and wander all over the city of Boston to real estate agencies, life insurance agencies, and sell ties for $10 to $15, and he bought them for $3 to $5. It brought him a little bit of money, but joy that you can't imagine. So from my perspective, the key is to get a model that really works for you. If you understand what you're good at, not everyone's going to be a public speaker like me and leverage speaking skills, but the course that I teach for emerging entrepreneurs basically says, what do you love? What's your spark? What would you do if nobody was around? What do you want to be known for? What would you, if the money didn't care about money, if you had all the money in the world, what would you be doing today to fill up your day? And if you know what that is, that's the seed. That's the seed. Anyway.
How do you get to that point, though? Because the dream is one thing, and I think many of us have dreams. We have this alternate life or aspiration towards a different career or entrepreneurial, goal that we have. However, once we get too late in our lives, we get very, let's say, structured in our day-to-day, in our responsibilities, in our accountability. So to make the transition is more difficult than it is, in your 30s and 40s. It's more difficult than it is when you're in your teens or in your 20s. So somebody who is listening, who is more established, who has a family, who has responsibilities, bills, etc. How do you maneuver past those expectations of responsibilities to move into being entrepreneurial, considering you have these responsibilities that you have to take care of right now?
What a great question. What a great question. Number one, I am chaos in motion. So I've never considered any of those things. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. We're going to afford as a family to get the things we want if I'm doing what I want to do. When my kids over time, I have a 54-year-old, a 37, and a 33-year-old. When the kids used to come to me and say, Daddy, can we afford this? I say, well, we can afford it if I work a little harder and sell one more thing. I am organized, disorganized chaos. But to your point, I can only work with people, and you're a coach. You're a coach just like me. When I do my first lesson of pickleball or tennis back in the day, I can't make anyone burn with desire. I just can't. I can't. I can teach technique. I can be the one place you go once a week, twice a week, 3 times a week, where I fire you up. But by the time you reach the doorknob to your car, if that passion isn't in you, you will lose my inspiration. So the question for me is really, I'm going to reframe your question for sure. Are you ready? I know what propels me into the next thing. I'm going to tell you a story in a moment that you asked me to tell, the 11-page story. But there's got to be a moment in your... Now, by the way, I'm not saying somebody who's got a $150,000 executive vice president job in a corporation who's unhappy, should ditch that and come home one day and say to the 3 kids, Daddy's going to teach bowling lessons at the bowling alley, because that's my true self. Oh my God. I'm certainly not saying that. I'm saying if you're very unhappy and there gets to be a moment, look what happened with the tennis thing. I was at the top. I wasn't fired. I was at the top of my game, but I was unhappy. And I had to figure a transition into something that would be more fulfilling. So what I would say to anyone who's, I'm going to use the story I just created, that $150,000 a year executive, build a side hustle. Go slow. Use training wheels first. Feed the part of you that says, I can do more. I can be more. I have value that no one even appreciates. I'm going to find a place to put my self-esteem, my value in a new and original place. And if it takes off, well, maybe someday I'll get to decide corporate position versus my business. So that's what I say. Some of this takes a lot of, as we used to say in the old neighborhood, gulyonis, chutzpah in Yiddish. I 100% am suggesting that sometimes walking away from the stable, good thing is the thing that's going to be the opening. I say run to the light. There's a little crack of light. Run to the light. Move towards the light. I had an experience where I sold 60 franchises in 3 months for a client, and I took them from obscurity to the national leader in 18 months. And the owner of the company passed away. Somebody took the business over and disbanded the division I made, creating havoc, creating legal, fights and all kinds of things. But I was at the top of the world, and all of a sudden it just disappeared. So I called again George Nadaff, you remember George from that story, who when I left him to compete with him, said, Jay, I rented you, I didn't buy you, and I knew that from the minute I met you. And you gave me 1 great year, and I know you're going to compete with me. There's plenty of room for all of us. But kid, if you ever fall down and scrape your knee, the light is always on. You can always come back. You did what you said you were going to do. Remember, Uncle George is here. But go be fruitful and multiply. I pray for your success. What a great moment. I've used that example in my world of owning companies for years when people leave me. Great. So one day when I fell down, i.e., they disbanded the franchise that I had just built, I called up George and I was fishing. I was pretending it was a casual call, but I was looking to go back in some way. I call him up and he says, Jay, this is the most amazing coincidence. I am launching a brand new franchise. It's going to be based out of New York City. It's called Boston Chicken. I'm going to build another chicken empire. And you calling today is a sign. I want you to be the president of it, and I want you to market it. I'm going to move you. What money do you need? I'll wire it tomorrow. I'll relocate you and your young bride. I was just going to get married to a young, wonderful gal. And I'll move you out. I'll bring your furniture. I'll put you in mid-Manhattan. I'll put you up. This is so exciting. So I go upstairs to my new bride. She was only 21 at the time. I was 37, to put people in a frame of reference. And I say, George Naniff is going to send us $10,000 wire tomorrow. Now, this was 30, 40 years ago. $10,000 was huge. He's sending us this dough. We're going to New York, the most exciting city in America. You've never seen it. We're going to have a great time. We're going to be put up in mid-Manhattan. And the minute those words came out, and I shared that with Lee, I realized I didn't want that to happen. A part of me said, do you really want to be in the chicken business? Do you want to build a chicken empire? Do you want to talk about chicken for the next 10 years? Do you want to stay in franchising? You've already done it. Ugh. I got more and more upset. But I didn't tell Lee because she felt so good that I had chosen the stable path, right? Late one night, she went to sleep. 2 days later, we were living at the Oakwood Garden temporary apartments. We had put our furniture in storage. We were ready to do something new. And I was sitting by the swimming pool at the Oakwood Garden apartment, massive Olympic swimming pool, 250 chaise lounges around the swimming pool. And I'm having one of those existential moments in between trapezes. Whither thou goest? Who am I really? What's my next move? Do I want to be a chicken empire builder? Do I want to stay in franchising? Is my heart yearning to do something else? I'm thinking all those thoughts, and a bald-headed guy in Bermuda shorts with a baseball cap sits down in the chaise lounge next to me. Now, there's 250 empty seats. It's 11 at night. There's nobody around, just me and him. He sits down and he says, you look deeply contemplative. A penny for your thoughts. I said, oh boy, you don't want to go there. Because in the dictionary, next to the word loquacious is my picture. I don't have a short form. Do you really want to know what's on my mind? He said, yeah. So I shared for 10 minutes where I was at. Should I do this? Should I do that? What am I? Who am I? All of that. He gets up and he leaves. And I go, I bored him to death. But he comes back, thank God. And he brings me a book, and I recommend it to everybody to this day, Frogs into Princes, the seminal work of neurolinguistic programming, created by John Grinder and Richard Bandler. The book has been read so often the spine is broken. There are notes on every single page, scribbled all over it. He sits down and he says, read this book now while I'm here. I said, now? He said, now. I read your 11 pages, Dwayne. I read those 11 pages. And by the time I got to the end of the 11th page, he was gone. And I knew that I had a blueprint for the rest of my life. I ran up to the apartment, the little rental that we were living in, the one-bedroom apartment. I woke Lee up and I said, we're not going to New York. We're sending the money back. She goes, really? What are we going to do? I held the book up and I said, I'm going to be an NLP trainer. I'm going to build an NLP training company. This book just touched me in a way that nothing has ever touched me. This guy told me I was born to do this. I was born to do this. And I won't bore anybody with the rest of the details. The very next day, I created a $5,000 account for a day of NLP training off of the first 11 pages. Within a year, we were doing $1 million contracts. We sold $11.2 million of NLP training to corporate America, all based on a bald-headed man sitting next to me giving me a book. So there were no small moments. Life leaves clues. You don't need credentials. You just need to reach a point of dissatisfaction where you say, I got to, I have no alternative. I don't have an alternative. I don't have a plan B, Dwayne. When I decide to do something, I'm going to do it because I'm unhappy and I need to move towards happiness. It's just, no, I work with people who have that. Now you do too. You were telling me in the setup for this that it's odd. People come in and they postpone fitness and whatever. I say to people in the first lesson in pickleball, I can teach you stuff, but if you don't go work on this and drill on this, if you just go play games, don't come back. I don't need more students. I need students who I enjoy working with. And if you're hungry to get better, you'll take risk. You won't care about points. You'll explore. You'll use new stuff and you'll drill your brains out. So I'll know next week when you come for the next 2-hour lesson whether you did the work or not. And if you don't do the work, let's be honest with one another. So I'm looking, I think the key is, when do people reach the boiling point where something inside them says, I need to move, I need to shift, I need to do something else. And they don't need to, by the way, blow up what they're doing. I mean, your question is really well. I mean, you can't, I want to be a reasonable coach. I don't want to sabotage anyone, but you can do it part-time. You can find where your niche is part-time. You can find your Seidenstricker glass like my mother did. She didn't mean on that day to find something that would put my brother through Harvard. She just read that sign correctly and was bold. Anyway, I hope that answers a little bit of the question.
It does. And it brings me up to a follow-up question, because a lot of people wait to take action until they have proof, certainty, credentials, those sort of things. Now, you mentioned that sometimes it's not about those items themselves. Sometimes it's about a point in which you feel that you're just not happy and there's no way that you can continue to stay in this position, being and feeling the way that you are. So you gave yourself permission to move before you potentially were ready based on certain skill sets or criterias. What would somebody else listening to that story and thinking about where they're at? They're definitely not in a happy place. They want to make that decision, but they're still waiting for permission to move. What would you say to that individual?
I'm going to give you an example instead of talking about this theoretically. As I've developed the book and now this training program that I'm doing online, and that doesn't exist yet, but in the next 2 weeks it will exist. As I'm thinking about it, my job as a teacher trainer is to create results. The only thing that has ever created, I created a $1 billion company in my backyard. And all I needed was proof in the beginning to build my belief system. So from my standpoint, once again, I'm going to say it, not everyone has my skill set, which is communication and speaking, okay? But if there's somebody today listening to this in Akron, Ohio, and they are an extraordinary plumber working for someone in a plumbing company, why can't they have their own truck? Why can't they scale one truck to be 5 trucks, and 10 years from now have a small fleet of 8 to 10 trucks, which puts them in a fancy neighborhood and their kids in any schools they want? That's the dream that I want to leverage and kindle in people.
Can I, to respond to that, I think, because I've gone through this myself, I think it's the responsibility of taking on all of that on your own, because there's a safety in knowing that every 2 weeks you're going to get a paycheck. There's a safety in knowing that you're covered through benefits. There's a safety in knowing that you don't have to deal with the logistics of running a business. But taking on that responsibility and using your example, taking on that truck means I got to do all the marketing, I got to do the advertising, I got to do the sales, I got to do the accounting, I got to do the financing. that I think is that overwhelming part. It's not the fact that I feel some people don't want the dream, they want it. I think it's everything else that comes along with it.
Yeah, people often ask me, because I'm incidentally, but not directly, an inspirational coach. Hopefully, my being and my stories kindle in someone. I just had a student of mine read the book. The book's been out a month, so I have 60 people bought the book and read the book. And Ingrid Hardy, a former marvelous Division I basketball player, read the book and got immediately back to me. Now, she's got a big position in a company. Her and her husband are just really doing well. But when she read the book, she realized there's something more for me to do. And you know this as an influencer and as a coach. You've heard the conventional, I hate to use hackneyed conventional cliches, but you can't push a rope up a hill. You just can't do it. I can't be the motivational component. I can give you the knowledge, I can give you the path, I can show you where to find your spark, but moving through what you just discussed is not an easy situation. I'll give you a quick example. My kid brother, the Harvard student, he did everything right. I did nothing right, just so you understand. I have no degrees in anything. But my kid brother went to Boston Land School, graduated number 11 in the oldest high school in the history of the United States, formed in 1635, 11th in the class, went on to Harvard, phenomenally successful. He can't do what I do one day of his life. I'm just going to be really clear. Some people can operate in unstructured environments, and some people need structured environments. So my teaching is for people who immediately understand, number one, they are so irritated. They are so irritated. I don't know why I'm telling you this, but my 33-year-old came over yesterday, and she's about to make another transition. And I said, "Where do you want to go?" She said, "I want a corporate position. I want wages, benefits. I want an executive washroom. I want a corporate job." Now, I, as her dad, I won't even go to lunch with anyone. The idea that I'm going to go to a building, walk in, have a boss say, "We're meeting in a half hour, bring your notes." That idea makes me crazy. Do you understand? I've never gone to lunch with anyone. I don't go to a building. No one tells me we're having a meeting in a half hour. That's the worst reality. So anyway, here we go. So the question is, can you operate emotionally in an unstructured environment? My brother had 30,000 salespeople work for him. He had 7 people report to him, but every day he had an executive washroom, an executive parking space, an executive assistant. I have never had any of those things, ever. I mean, listen, if your heart says you must do something, and in my case, I don't know if you're familiar with much of the NLP model, but we make a distinction, these meta programs. You're trying to read someone's mental map. And there are a category of people called move toward, who are motivated by the idea that they're going to have a bigger house, the idea they're going to have a nicer car, the idea they're going to be able to afford the education for their children, the idea they could put straight teeth on their children. That's a move toward individual. I'm not a move towards. I won't walk across the street to pick up a $20 bill. It's got nothing to do with me. I am the classic move away. I am motivated by avoiding things that piss me off, that irritate me. The thought of them makes me sweat. And I will carve and do and endure what I need to endure in order to have that kind of autonomy and freedom. So I'm looking, we have 340 million people, you and I here, right in our little country. We're looking for 0.25% of the people who have reached the boiling point and need some structure and some ideas, some reinvention strategies. They need to know what their value is. We create baseline, all of the good work. But that's my answer. I hope I answered it. If I didn't, do it again.
Oh, no, you answered it. And I love where you're going with it, because it sounds like either for you to change, and I believe this in a lot of ways, your desire to change, to be different, has to be greater than the comfort of staying the same. And that in itself is I think, a model most people need to really look at within their own lives in certain instances. I like what you talked about there, though, because you added a different layer to it, because you're a person who instinctively is allergic to, it seems like, the common practices of society in a lot of ways. And you don't want to be told what to do. You don't want to run in a certain circle that is commonplace, that most people just get accustomed to. You sound like somebody who also challenges, and not from a sociological aspect, but from a personal aspect, you challenge the status quo. But ultimately, whatever it is, for you, Jay, you want to do things that are aligned with your happiness, that are aligned with your well-being, and you're not willing to be complacent about that. I feel that there's a lot of people who imagine themselves to be the same way, but find it very difficult to live that out, because complacency, comfort, societal norms keep people stuck. And it because there's a layer of safety there. There's a layer of, awareness and what's that word I'm looking for? The opposite of spontaneity. There's assurance. There's predictability. There's assurances there. You're somebody who isn't, and it's not like you do things willy-nilly, like you're just going to go out there and do things, carelessly. But it seems like you're driven by ensuring that you are happy and that alignment is 100%. And you will do whatever you need to do to move into that alignment, especially when it's not in alignment. A lot of people struggle with that. I think a lot of people find comfort in just being in that day-to-day, predictable, normal life set.
And I'm okay with that. 2 of my 3 children are exactly like that, and they're very, very happy. One of them is just like dad and hungry to create their own lane, to do their own thing. And Dwayne, you got me 100%. That analysis is spot on. And I want to share one last point, because we're talking about modeling. And I said, model my parents. If you don't got the parents you want, model my parents. But the matriarch that created the entire structure of my life was my maternal grandmother, my Nana Lil. My folks were so broke that we didn't have our own apartment until I was 5 years old. So I lived, and they left me all day long with my maternal grandmother, Nana Lil. And she was an old European tight haircut, hit you with a spatula, washed your mouth out with soap. Any infraction was immediately reprimanded and disciplined. But I adored Nana Lil. I adored her. And at the end of her life, and let this be an inspiration to everyone, I know it is to me, at the end of her life, she started falling down. So she was 91, 92. She wanted to stay in her own apartment back in Brighton, Massachusetts. Didn't want to move. And my mother and I carried on a holy war with her, and eventually got her into a rehab center, a senior convalescent home. And the moment I went to go see her 1 week after she was in, I got bawled out, but not in the way that I thought it was. She says, Jay, why didn't you get me in this place sooner? This is magical. This is paradise. 3 meals a day, snacks in the middle of the day, movie night, bingo cards. And I saw a little boy who I fell in love with in the 2nd grade when we lived in Dorchester. Then my family moved to Brighton, and I lost the little 2nd grader that I had a crush on. He's here. His name is Louis. He's here at the rehab center. And we are in love. In 10 days of being there, she fell madly in love. She said, this is my Romeo and Juliet situation. I loved your grandfather, but this is the passion of my life. At 92, she said, my Louis brings me a muffin wrapped in a napkin in the afternoon. Like it's the Hope Diamond, he hands it to me. I'm his girl. He's my boy. We're in love. Whoa. This is the woman who, when my grandfather passed away at age 65, went and got an automobile license for the first time, of course, because in that day, women didn't drive. We only had one car in the entire family, so it wasn't even relevant. But she went and got a license so she could go collect debt that my grandfather was too soft and too lovely to get. So she's at the rehab center. 1 year later, she's still madly in love with Louis, and I've moved to California, so I don't see her that much anymore. I go to see her, and she's sitting in a courtyard in a September afternoon. The sun is setting. She's next to Louis in the courtyard. Their walkers are in front of them. They're holding hands. I go see them. I hug both of them. I have a delightful hour and a half visit with them. I know I'm going back to California, and I have a feeling, she was almost 97, 98. I have a feeling this probably might be the last time I see her. I hug her, I kiss her, I love her, and I leave. When I leave, I go through a walkway that allows me to not be seen, but to see the two of them in the chairs with the walkers in front of them. They stand up together because it's getting chilly out, and I'm mesmerized by the image of the two of them. I'm taking it in, I'm absorbing it, I'm loving it. I'm knowing this is going to have impact for the rest of my life. I feel good about it. They stand up, and with their walkers, they waddle. You know, that senior, I waddle now, by the way. They do that senior unsteady thing on the walker. They go 2 or 3 steps. They're so impassioned by one another that they stop and they kiss. Then they waddle, then they kiss all the way across the courtyard. It is never too late to create the masterpiece. So here's what I want people to know. If you're down, we'll use your example. If you're in the middle of your life, but you're unhappy and you're looking to transition into what you really want to do, number one, find it. You won't find it in the Wall Street Journal ads. You won't. God knows where you'll find it. But find what you care about. Put your value to what you care about, and then dream on it. Do it very part-time to make the transition. But just know that those first 45 years, if your lifespan is 90 and you're 45, those 45 years are full of rich experiences. If you know what they are, if you can name them and label them, if you can love yourself by saying, oh my God, I mean, you know, read the book, guys. My book is a funny book. It's not like any instructional book you've ever read. It's just a bunch of stories I've been telling my children forever. And I only wrote the bloody book because the kid said, Daddy, you're going to go to heaven soon, and your great-grandchildren will never know the Ray Sprinkle story. They'll never know the George Nadeff story. They'll never know the bald-headed guy at the swimming pool story. For God's sakes, put it down some way so that people you don't know in your life will be able to have that experience with you. So anyways, that's what I got.
I love that. That's great work that you're doing. So for anybody at any age that's looking at their current position right now and is looking to expand, looking to do the things that they want to do, have we not touched on something you'd want to say to them right now that you would like to?
Yeah. My number one instruction in life is stay open at the top. I was giving the keynote speech at the California Association of Realtors, about 10,000 people in a big auditorium in San Diego. I'm trying to sell books and tapes and classes in the back of the room. I've been paid a very modest fee to give this speech, but this is a big opportunity. I'm being funny and I'm moving and I'm telling stories and I'm doing this and I'm identifying who loves me in the crowd, who's beaming back love. And I see a guy in the front row with a walker. He must be 90 years old. He's in the very front row. And he's loving me, and I'm loving him, and I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm winning. I am winding down to sell something in the back of the room, and he stands up with his walker, and he starts going down this massive aisle down the middle of this huge auditorium, and I'm going, I thought I had that guy. I thought that guy loved me. Maybe he has to urinate. I don't know what's going on, but why is he going? When it's over, I run down the aisle to be with my staff, to sign books and shake hands and kiss babies. And he's the first guy in the line. He made sure that he got there first. That's why he got up and walked down that aisle with his walker. I've never been, you have these bursts of happiness in life. I was so happy to see him there. I hug him. I shake his hand. I say, I noticed you were digging what I was saying. What do you look forward to in this training program you're buying? He said, kid, I love the presentation. I didn't learn that much because I've been doing real estate for 40 years. But you reminded me of things that do work. That's great. You gave me one or two ideas I never thought of before, so I'm grateful for that. But I'm not buying your $100 course because of the content. I'm buying it because every year I have a $1,000 growth budget, and I haven't bought the $1,000 yet. You fit in that paradigm. Can you imagine 40 years in the industry, 90 years, and he's got a growth budget of $1,000 a year. Open at the top. No matter what happens, if I'm influencing anyone in any way, watching this, reading the book, taking your course, is for God's sakes, the dullest people in my family are the ones who never had a new thought. Once they had constructs, they just kept regurgitating the constructs, telling the same stories. Just be open and great things will happen. That's my message.
Great message. Well, Coach Jay, this is the time of our conversation where you get to read that letter to your former self. So, yeah, the floor is yours.
Hey, little Jay, here's the deal. That chaos you're experiencing, that random nuttiness that you're putting out in the world, your spectacular failures, all of the goofiness, the things that irritate or disappoint others are the building blocks, are the energetics that are going to later on in life just burst into the kinds of success that you can't even imagine. Keep being goofy, keep being silly, keep your sense of humor, keep your perspective, and keep being you. Because even though it looks like chaos now, even though many people think that you're ridiculous in many instances, you may be the bottom now, but these characteristics are the pieces that will create the dynamism that will help you have a bigger life. The guy who finished first in the Boston Latin School, is he going to be happy? Or I finished last? Who's going to win the happiness, social satisfaction game? So embrace the chaos, little boy. It's going to bring you down some silly roads, but it's all part of the fabric of who you become eventually.
That is great. Jay, thank you so much for this conversation today. Your energy, your stories, and your intention were really inspiring. Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you, Dwayne. I love you. I love what you're doing. Keep it up, buddy.